Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode. We're super delighted to welcome Tommie, Chief Strategy Officer from Lawtrades, who's with us today to talk about the A to Z of AI. Tommie, we've known each other for a while, but I'd love for you to introduce yourself to all of our viewers and our listeners. Tell us a bit more about yourself and also tell us about Lawtrades.
Yeah, I'm happy to. First of all, Anthony, thank you for having me. You know that we're very proud partners of the L Suite. So anytime I can spend with you is just a delight and a pleasure, as well as all of your team. So, Lawtrades is an AI powered ALSP. We are a marketplace for legal talent on demand. So, you can think of us if you need lawyers, if you need legal ops professional, if you need AI consulting. And of course, we're going to talk a ton about AI today. So, I think people will be really interested and refreshed to hear some of the really cool stuff that we're doing at Lawtrades. I got to Lawtrades by way of human relationships by knowing Ashish and Ron, the co-founders, which has been wonderful, getting to know them, ultimately coming on board through that relationship. But prior to that, I spent most of my career on legal teams in-house, building legal operations from the ground up foundationally for a couple of really cool brands and, learning how lawyers think, how they tick, how they work has all been sort of instrumental in understanding how do they use technology? How do they use AI? And then, of course, my own background of just being someone who is, has an insatiable curiosity around innovation and technology and just, I think, asking the question, why? Why do we do things like this? Why is this like this? And I think all of that has naturally led to a curiosity around AI. Why, how, and all of that will be some of what we dig into today.
Awesome. I'm excited. And yeah, Tommie, I want to also just say thanks to you and your team. It's been such a pleasure to be able to partner with you all for a number of years via the L Suite, and super excited to have this discussion today. I want to dig a little bit into your role today, but maybe I want to start with looking back first. And I want you to think about pre-generative AI. So I'm asking you to think about 3 years ago. And I'm guessing at that point you were fully in a legal ops role. What did your work look like before Gen AI?
We're going to go back to the before times, are we? Um, my work largely looked like um, trying to understand what the business needed from the legal team and trying to always stay 10 to 100 feet in front of that legal team ever being a bottleneck to the business. And so that came in many, many forms. Most of it was technology. Most of my elevator pitch was operationalize the way that legal expertise gets out to the business. And sometimes that came in the form of contracts, and sometimes that came in the form of a, FAQ page. And sometimes that came in the form of being like a de facto chief of staff to the general counsel and CLO and understanding what they needed or who they needed, or being in meetings that they weren't in and understanding what they might need to know. And some of that stuff is actually, I think, a little bit of what we'll talk about today, which is like, what's the human nuance in all of this technology? So like some of that actually is very much so that same story. But really in a 30-second pitch, what my day probably looked like if we were 3 years ago was probably some form of whatever tech implementation I was working on and some form of relationships with other ops leaders in the business, whether they were rev ops or fin ops. We had a little cohort of them in my last role, and all of us trying to understand how we could sort of like work best together. And then there was like the really unsexy and boring stuff, which was like, what application is overdue for some state qualification, and did we get served via snail mail to the wrong office, and figuring out sort of how to make sure things like that never happened again.
Yeah, yeah. Lots of interesting pieces there. I want us to quickly jump into, the meat of the combo, but tell us a little bit about what does your work look like now at Lawtrades, as Chief Strategy Officer?
So hilariously, what my work looks like today is even different than if you said, what does your work look like 6 months ago at Lawtrades, right? And I could even tell you that contrast in a minute. But today it is probably it's equal parts orchestrating some agents, which we're going to talk a little bit about, having chats with not real people. But also when I'm in the office today, I happen to be home, but typically we spend a lot of time together. When I'm in the office, a lot of the day actually is also all of us talking together. So all of us that are in the office, whether we are strategizing together, whether we're talking about the direction of the product, whether we're talking about, the conferences that are coming up, webinars, the content, the strategy for that content, what is the messaging around all of the efforts that we're doing. So a lot of time is spent talking myself with a bot. A lot of it is orchestrated some agents to get work done. A lot of it is actually sitting there and trying my best to break up the day so that I can stare at the wall and think about nothing, because I do like to break ideation time. And what I mean by sit there and stare and do nothing, it's like, all right, well, if we want to put out a white paper, if we have a webinar coming up, what's that topic? And that's just not something that I'm ready to force or have or rush or I don't want that part, the creative part. I don't want that to be agentic. Like we might get there. We might get there where the bots are writing content or writing novels or writing screenplays, but I'm going to push back on that as much as possible. Not only because it's what I enjoy, but I hope that when we get to a society that is largely agentic, all of us can enjoy what is human, and that's to me is like creativity, music, right, arts. So a lot of the day looks like some combo of prep, planning, talking about the macro. What is the year, December, January, all we've been talking about is sort of the year, the roadmap, ensuring that we're staying aligned with what we set out to do, talking with each other. And that's even different than 6 months ago, Anthony. 6 months ago, though I was using um, LLMs, I I wasn't orchestrating agents, right? So now even the LLMs themselves have become agentic. And if you're in a company that has the right risk posture and security posture and allows you to utilize tools, has the right, sort of infrastructure, which we do, now I'm largely using, some agents to do work. So on one side of my screen, I can watch the work that I'm commanding get done, while on the other side of the screen that I'm doing some other work. And it's kind of wild. I'm not going to lie.
Well, yeah, Tommie, one of the things that I'm hearing is it sounds like the way that you and the company have been using AI is just letting you be a lot more maybe intentional. And one thing that I know is true from sitting in the GC seat and working with legal ops is so much of the challenge of the job is finding a way to take a break from drinking out of the fire hose long enough to think, long enough to
Right.
have conversations, long enough to bring those really important human and often very strategic elements into the work. So, what's your impression of how much more intentionality being able to delegate to agents has enabled you to just bring to your work?
Well, ironically, I think some of that intentionality is the same issue whether you're delegating to human or to
Right.
agent. On the one hand, what a lot of legal leaders in particular struggle with is not knowing where to get started. And from conversations that I've had, I've learned it's because the friction point is not knowing what to delegate or not being comfortable delegating. And that is the same actual narrative, whether you're human or delegating to an agent. We talk a lot about humans in the loop with these workflows. And so some of that all comes from not being sure if you can fully sort of trust what that work will be. So I think a lot of folks are still in that place where they want to really have that chat forum, not the agentic workflow forum, because they're not quite ready to give up control, which in some regards is perfectly appropriate, particularly in the legal sector, and then particularly in depending on what you're doing, right? So for me, I think like I'll give an example. Like there's a voluminous work of like data work I had to do this week. Like, and that's with enriching records, like in our CRM and HubSpot. And like it's probably no secret to anybody that we're a business and we use a CRM. But what I'm really learning with these agentic workflows is the data is so important, right? So if I want to be able, on the one hand, to say, hey, give me an output of what the effort was this week, what the kind of output of, say, sales effort is or marketing effort. What matters is the data that it's pulling is correct. So what matters is that we actually had really foundational workflows, that the way that we tag data is correct, that we are tagging things that we want to learn about later. So for example, if you don't tag that you've had a discovery call, but later you want to see like week over week, what is the growth, you're not going to see it, right? And so it's
Yeah.
interesting because my week this week in particular was half split between building out some agentic workflows as well as going, quick data cleanup before we get there, right? Because on the other side of it, you want to see. So I think some of that is also what I presume legal leaders know, struggle with, or are right inside of, which is whatever it is that I build and whatever it is that I want to be the end result, it has to be a really good infrastructure at the outset. And so I think a lot of people get overwhelmed there because now you have very, very powerful vehicles to pulling tons of information, synthesizing it, showing it to you in ways that you didn't know were possible. But what do you have to do before you get there? Well, you have to decide what the process is. You have to decide what goes into the systems that you want to extrapolate out of. And all of that becomes so overwhelming that people are like, just forget it.
I love this,
Forget
Tommie.
it.
Your initial connection to really some of our challenges with using AI and agents in particular very well. They really are the same kinds of challenges we have with human delegation,
Yeah.
management, human interaction. I think an interesting thing is on the human side, there's always a trust building process, right?
Yeah.
You might start by delegating just a little bit, really depending on your style. Some people, give the whole project and see what the person can do. Some people are more comfortable giving pieces at a time. But managers and people who work with others develop good systems for building that trust battery and figuring out, okay, I can delegate this versus these other things I can't. Or I can delegate to this person, but I need to remember that they need instructions in this particular way and they need this kind of background in order to succeed. How do you develop a similar kind of understanding of how to delegate effectively to AI and agents? Because there are parallels, but the ways that an agent can succeed or fail can look quite different than the way that a person can succeed or fail also.
Oh, you are so spot on, Zach. I love that. Perfection, like absolutely no notes, right? The exact same way that I learned to trust when I was leading people is the same way, which is you have to take that first step. So you have to first go, I have to delegate, like, and things might very well go wrong, right? And so you have to figure out on your first, journey out into delegation, maybe as a GC, you're not handing the company litigation project to someone where you're first
Yeah.
developing that rapport, right? But there, I'm sure, are the like smaller things that you can hand to someone to develop the rapport, to develop how it is. And it's the same thing. Like maybe if you're not ready to take gigantic leaps with like agentic workflows and you're not really ready to see your work being done in front of you and you're not really ready for system connectivity, could you start by, I don't know, taking a screenshot of your day and saying, like, what are the priorities here? Or start by connecting just your email and going in and saying, what are my priorities today? Like just this morning, I prompted Claude and said, are there any emails from the L suite that I haven't answered that are important? Because everything's very timely with us and I miss many of them. And it sure, it told me what I was missing. That would be a baby step of like, now can we get to you drafting an email for me? Like now can you get to sending it without me reviewing it? But maybe I need to like see the first 10 to be like, is that the right tone? Are you actually talking about the things that I care about in that email? So it's all that sort of trust but verify. Same thing as a human relationship. So the parallels are uncanny, frankly. But the other option you can take, and this is what makes for a bad leader, is you could never trust, you can never delegate, you could get burnt out, you can never learn that professional growth is a part of your own leadership growth at a certain point that you're not doing anymore, you're orchestrating. So you would have to ask yourself in your own career growth, are you okay with doing to the point of burning out? And further, with AI, are you okay with doing to the point, and this is where everyone's very scared of being left behind. Your peers are going to, they're, many of them are going to they're going to take this leap. They're going to take this risk. And if you don't, and if you don't learn what it is, and if you don't learn how to trust but verify, if you don't learn how to delegate, and if you don't learn how to orchestrate, someone will. And then you're not going to be even in competition with that person. And so is that's probably the friction point for many people, that could be the reality. And that's very unsettling. And I think at least we all can come together and realize that right now we're all unsettled in the same way. This is, uh, this is a revolution. We are going from horses to cars to planes. Like, all of society will evolve. It will change. It's going to look very different. And that we all have in common. And that is unsettling. And we're all uncomfortable. And that's why there is such a race to figure this out at the same time collectively.
And Tommie, I'm so glad you said that. It's something we actually talked about when we saw each other in person early this week at the Liquidity Summit, right? That sense of so many folks feeling both excited,
Yeah.
a bit of the wow factor, and also, oh my gosh, I've got to keep up, right? So
Right.
I want to get super practical because I'm curious to hear maybe in a practical way, you use this week's task as an example, right? Like going into HubSpot, doing a ton of updates. Tell us a little bit about how you perhaps used AI there. I'm assuming with the connector with one of the traditional models. How did you use maybe AI there? Question one. And then two, what limitations did you see and how did you work around that?
Yeah. So let me first start. I'm going to set the stage by saying, Anthony, you and the L Suite are going to have a conversation with Rod, in a couple of weeks.
Yes.
And I'm not going to take any of his thunder.
Yeah.
Because there's sort of like, there's two universes happening right now at Lawtrades. There's
Yes.
there's year 3000, which is what Rod is on.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and that's an amazing combo for you all to have. But I want to acknowledge that there is a whole other universe that's actually above me that's going to, I think, blow everyone's minds when they hear that webinar. But down here, like in I don't know, let's say in year 2030, he's in year 3000, I'm in 2030. Here we are. I've used every model. I have every model available to me: Perplexity, Chat, Anthropic, Copilot. Like, the world's my oyster. I use Zapier a ton. We have, we have an entire company built on automations and also that empowerment to use whatever models we want. The last few weeks, and this is by happenstance, right? Like, because we're constantly switching, evolving, seeing what is going on. And I also use a couple models at the same time, and I'll explain why. Like, usually if I have a project going on in one model, I'll still keep going in other models, right? Like, I'll still keep doing sort of other work because I can do several different things in the same hour when I have things happening behind me. So the last few weeks, big, heavy on the Anthropic. Claude blowing us away over here at HQ, let me tell you. Just everybody's going wild. So we have the chat feature, we have the co-work, we have the code. Full disclosure, I haven't done anything with coding, don't know how. But then we also have like Replit and all the other tools that could sort of bring this together. so I've had some projects where like it's been a lot of that workflow of like getting that data out of systems,
Hmm.
automating and working. But we have everything set up from like, Slack channels where if certain emojis are utilized, that's creating a linear ticket. Linear is where we do all of our sort of project management. That's creating another automation that is kicking off. So a lot of things are sort of like working together in this deep orchestration, right? Um, we obviously have contracts, we have clients. This week, our head of finance made an agent whereby, if you're inside of Slack and you at mention that agent, it will generate the contract for you. And so it's pulling data right out of like HubSpot, like right out of where we're keeping the data. The agent's like auto generating something, and then we're doing this sort of connectivity of all different types of systems so that we can do bigger analysis. And then I'm going to pause and say what the product team has been doing. It's probably far more impressive than anything that I'm telling you about. I'm telling you about like the boring infrastructure. What's the day to day? What's the sort of like the strategy stuff? They're literally taking the product and the whole thing is backed by its own AI. So we have Lawtrades AI, and you can go in there, and because the business is legal talent, if I'm legal talent, I can go in, I can upload a resume. It'll create the entire profile for you. You can go and tinker with it. But what used to be probably someone sitting down for a couple of hours to make themselves look really good is now done in 30 seconds. And then they can go in and tinker, right? And then they can go and find things that they're matched with. And all of that is powered by AI. So, like the algorithm of like, what is a really good role for you and who is really good for that role comes together so seamlessly, like so spot on. All that's happening algorithmically inside of the product, and then they're working on some other really incredible things that I don't want to announce yet because they're going to be very big product launches. But so everyone has their different area of where they are working, and I would say basically the mantra is what can you do with AI? Like, what do you do in the day that you can make that much better by leveraging these LLMs? And so all of us have really challenged ourselves to go, what is it that I can do like with these products?
Tell me, that's great. That last point, really asking ourselves that question, what can we do? I often find that's the most important question that we could be asking when it comes to AI is, having that curiosity of thinking, hey, I wonder how an agent or I wonder how an LLM would be able to handle this problem. Um, at the same time, especially in teams, everyone has different comfort levels with these tools. How have you all been able to kind of encourage the maybe AI curious, but not folks like us who really nerd out over this? How do you encourage them to get started, to begin asking those questions, and to begin making their lives easier and their work more effective?
On the one hand, we're very lucky because we're all a bunch of nerds.
Yeah.
So that's sort of that does help actually. Like we are very lucky. But I would say we're all really good at saying what could be better. And some of that started with the journey for both the talent and the client. Like, what is the journey that each of them go through and what could be better? Even when I started, I said, I'm going to go through our platform. I'm going to pretend like I'm talent. I just want to know what the journey is. I want to know what the experience is like. I'm sure many a good product team have people full time. That's all they're doing, right? They're finding out what the bugs are. Like, what is it? So I think even if we were to say if there's someone who's not insatiably curious, but I think most of us really are, it is also we're constantly asking each other and that question of like, well, what could we do better here? What could we do better? Because we recognize as an organization that the parse between what is very, very important for the human expertise, the human overlay, the human strategic leader, we recognize that that's the part where we all want to be super, super, super dialed in. We call it our own LLM. Like we want our own LLM, like to have that freedom. But what is the stuff that we can use the agentic LLMs for? And so we're always like I think because we are very good at communicating with each other about spending our weeks like bookended with meetings where we kick off Mondays. We have a meeting in the middle of the afternoon on a Monday. We're talking through statuses of everything. We're going through like just sort of like a touch base from every department in the company. From there, we're going through our week all aligned on what like the priorities are. And then we're concluding with like, what are the wins? Like, did we get to where we hope to get to? And so inside of all of that, you can ask yourself like, what what gets delegated out to the LLM so that I'm staying on target with where we said we want it to be. And I think all of that is like been what's made us move at a pace that is frankly unbelievable.
That's fantastic. A couple questions come to mind that really bring this together with some of what we talked about earlier. Um, I'll pitch two questions at once. How are you all thinking about actually judging success when you deploy AI in the many ways that you have? And I'm curious, are there some examples of ways that you or the team really tried to make LLMs effective for you and it just didn't work out, and that too resulted in a learning?
Great questions. Um, I'll start with the second one because so far I won't say there were failures per se as much as so it all works. And I think the reason why it all works is because culturally we we are great experimenters.
Yeah.
And so to that degree it all works because even if something's not working, we're able to very quickly say, this is not what I was hoping the output would be, and I'm going to pivot. And so I think because we're super crisp on what is the definition of success, what is it that we're trying to get, what does the output look like? If we can clearly get there, we can define like what is not working quickly and move on. So I think all of the tools are always working, but if something is not like the output that we hoped, we have that freedom to move on. So, for example, even last year, I think that we were doing a lot of work towards leveraging what is now a very integrated part of our marketplace, where we thought that that would sort of be a standalone product or service where we would have a legal product, right? And so it took many iterations of going through and leveraging and utilizing and seeing what form and shape it would take for us to get to actually the best application of where this expertise is and where our engineering power is to actually have this synthesized throughout the platform rather than some standalone tool because and this was very informative and this only took sort of 6 months to get here, especially with the release of Claude's legal plugin this week, because the underlying LLMs that a lot of products are built on are getting there really fast. Like they're right. And so I'm actually really happy that we took those learnings and that we poured things into the main product, if you will, because now we're seeing all of these outside products and all of the foundational sort of LLMs, you know, getting there on their own, like much faster than I would have kind of anticipated. So I don't want to say it's like a fail fast kind of culture, but I think being able to like be extremely candid with each other, be really open, talk about what you're doing, talk about what success looks like, having these like super collaborative conversations around whether or not the mark is being hit or not, and then like how do we pivot? All of that lends to if something's not working, then we pivot and move on. And so might define that as a failure, might define that as like, an analysis, iteration, pivot, however you define it. But I think it's more just like discussing and collaborating and agreeing that like a different direction is the best way to go.
Yeah, and I mean what you're describing too, of course, is one of the great powers of being a company of this size, right? I mean, our
Yeah,
ability to iterate as quickly as possible is the thing that can distinguish us from the many other companies that have very different concerns. We'll just say, I mean, you can iterate 10 or 100 times as fast as some other much larger or much differently structured company can. AI helps.
absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. What's really resonating with me, Tommie, is so much of the cultural effect and impact. And candidly, it's come up in other conversations we've had with other guests. Like, I think that rings true. I mean, I happen to know Rod and Ashish personally. And so, like, I know that, right? Like, I know that
Yeah.
that would be the culture, but I think like that's so empowering when you can work in that environment and it's set by leadership. I'm trying to think of maybe some of the folks who may be listening and or watching this who may be on larger teams, either on a legal team, be that GC or in legal ops, maybe on a finance team, maybe an exec in another function, BD, sales, partnerships. And they're being asked to use AI and they need to then also communicate some form of how AI is transforming their work. Just curious to get your perspective on like any suggestions and or thoughts around how can one build a set of metrics and or how do they communicate success around the impact or effect AI is having on their work?
Well, I think I'm trying to sort of like put I work in house hat back on. I work in house. How do I communicate that? I think first, to your point and Zach's point about culture and empowerment, um, that's a friction point, right? And so, to the degree that you want to show success or you want to show um, what you're able to do, I think you have to actually start with something really practical, which is, are you empowered and able to do it? Do you have the culture supporting you? So let's actually pretend, so I can answer this question. Let's pretend that you do. Let's pretend you're at Anthropic, you're at Google, you're sort of like actually not empowered. You're told like you have to do these things, right? So it got over that first hurdle. And then the next is, not only being creative in what sort of solves your problems, but if I was on a legal ops team right now, I'd be doing a little bit of a roadshow of like, what are some problems that everyone's having that we can remove like the friction. So if you're my compliance leader, I might say to you like, hey, rather than maybe spending thousands of dollars, potentially tens of thousands of dollars on getting a certain like report of regulatory updates from outside counsel, like could we use an LLM to automatically give you that report? It can scrape not only all the firms, your emails, your newsletters, but the internet as well, probably government sites. And can it give you like a digest every week of some regulations that changed? And so depending on what industry you're in, and how that could be important, then you could even spin that up, have that connected to Slack, have that show, confetti comes off the screen when something changes that's very important to you. And then you can make that application everywhere. You can start with either the most friction full point and say, this is what I did and this is how I remove friction. You can start with like talking with sales ops, going, how is it that we get from, the first sales conversation to a contract signed, and how do we do that, agentically leveraging the tools that we have? Like, how do we share information about, clients really fast? If you have clients that could potentially be churning, how do we get reports that could show what signals show that that's happening and get an account manager on with them immediately, right? And so if you have these large swaths of data where you can say like, hey, like, let's take a look at where there was client churn and let's try to do an analysis. And if there's any sort of patterns that we can recognize, because let's face it, that's what these LLMs are sick at. Let's take some pattern recognition and let's build something that can alert us. And so if I were on a legal team working with sales team, that might be something. If privacy is a very big concern to you, you know, um, building something out so you can get DSARS requests or other requests. Maybe you even need to stay updated on what's happening, in AI itself. So I think the reality is like I could sit here and think of 100 problems someone could go solve, but these are all very personal questions for people to answer. And it depends on their culture and depends on what it is that they're trying to solve. And it depends on how they want to look like a rock star. Like that that could be one thing to one team and something very different to another team. So like just go on the journey of figuring out like what is really important for your team and your company. If saving money is your company's North Star, how do you contribute to that? If making more money is your company's North Star, how do you contribute to that? But like figure out what the what the company's North Stars are, what is the legal team's North Stars, and how do you slot into ensuring that you're playing some role in meeting those KPIs.
We often will close things up with what we call the A to Z moment. And this is usually just a couple kind of lightning round type questions. So I'll kick one off. Professionally or personally, what's one AI habit, so to speak, that you now pretty much can't imagine working or kind of living your life without?
I think that I am comfortable with AI being a part of every part of my life is what the moment is, right? Like I think it's not some sort of separate entity anymore. And hopefully we all get comfortable with understanding that this is like hopefully we're not talking about AI separately soon. Like let it be
Yeah.
like the internet or email or let it be that sort of synthesized with our lives in a good way, in a good, like I have to put so many asterisks around things because like I think the robots are here but it is a synthesis. And what I mean is like I don't know how much of my day I would get done without it, but it probably would, I probably do like 3 days of work in one day now. And
Right.
so that's a very big moment, which is like the compounding sort of network effect of it all, of being able to like have a lot of separate work streams going, and a lot of it getting done like without my input. All of that that's the moment. That's extremely different than any way that I've ever worked uh, in my entire career.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, I certainly agree. I think of it very much the same way. That makes this next question all the more interesting, which is, what's one task or thing that you, though maybe you refuse to hand over to AI to do on your behalf?
I love this question because this one I think is actually the most important thing you've asked me today. The What I hope as a society that we do not lose are like human touches. So like I still will write a personalized thank you note to someone. Like that I don't, I text my wife, right? And like an agent doesn't. Anything that kind of is around like my kid, like I'll use AI for a lot of things. I'll actually use a lot of prompts to give me ideas of things that we can do, right? But like anything that's kind of really personal, I want to keep personal. Even just recently, this is a bad example because it's not exactly AI related, but it is sort of related to what I want to hold on to, the personal relationships. Like walked myself to a post office recently to send somebody a shirt because they said they love the Lawtrades shirts, and like that kind of stuff. Like, granted, like maybe that's a terrible example, but all of it, all in, I know that we're gonna lose sight, and we already have to a degree of some interpersonal stuff, and that I think is extremely important. Like I wanted to maybe write some of my emails, but, like, the ones where my kid or my friend's kid just, like, had an amazing recital or something, like, I wanna write those. Like, I wanna hold on to that stuff, as much as possible, because if we do move to a place where things can sort of be done for us, we'll lose a little bit of that. So I try to draw the line around, like, the things I care about right now, and I try to view it as if AI can do a lot of work for us, what is it that we want to do? Because if it
Right.
was actually able to do all of my work for me and I could sit on the beach and have a fruity drink, what would I want to do? And so if that's our end game, if that's where we're getting to, I think like, well, I'd want to be seeing live music or sitting on that beach with someone, right? Like, so I think all of that is what I try my best to hold on to.
Tommie, I love that. And can resonate with it. Thank you for sharing that. To close things out, Tommie, one final question. If someone listening today tried just one thing, what should it be?
Try the thing you don't want to do. Like leverage AI to do the thing that you don't want to do that day. Like, what are you like dreading? What report do you have to do? What regulator do you gotta like write something to? Like, just let it draft something. Try the thing you don't want to do, because there's sort of no there is no shortage, I think, to what you can leverage this technology for, right? Like, so whatever your friction point is, like, just get at it, you know? Like, there's something you don't want to do, hand it off to your assistant.
Amazing. Love that, Tommie. And really, really appreciate all of the insights you've shared. Super excited to continue to follow what you and the team are doing at Lawtrades. And I know within the L Suite universe, but for those of you who won't participate in that, definitely check out all the things that Rod is posting on LinkedIn as he's living in year 3000 as
He
well.
is in the future, people. You have got to follow him.
It's
he has
wild.
a AI workforce.
Exactly.
It is wild, wild stuff.
Oh, yeah. But anyway, Tommie, thank you so much. This has been great.
Anthony, thank you for having me. Thank you for our partnership. And Zach, thank you so much.
What a pleasure, Tommie.